He was recognized as a prodigy hypnotist at age 17, providing clients across the nation with his expertise. And joining us now to tell us more about his unique style of entertainment is mastermind Fred Lee.
Fred Lee.
Fred Lee. Fred Lee.
Fred Lee.
To be the ace of diamonds. Now, could you tell me exactly what it says on the face of that watch?
No. You already had
10:32. I gotta say, this is very much.
What's going on?
I don't know what's going on, but her feet look like huge duck feet. Are they shoes? Like, what's going on? Is that the new style? Like,
I don't know.
what's happening
What
right
celebrity has duck feet?
now? Donald Duck.
You're saying Donald Duck right there.
That's Donald Duck with duck feet.
Just jump. Or take a look up. Go and put the pieces together. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a perfect match!
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, good morning. Thank you all so much for having me at the Breakfast Club. My name is Fred Lee, and of course, here we are, magic revealed by an alligator. We'll get more into the alligator in a bit, but I'm just going to do a quick little introduction. So we'll move on to this slide. So my name is Fred Lee. I am a meta-thinking expert, award-winning magician, hypnotist, U.S. Army veteran, and I'll be sharing with you folks some of the highlights of my career, as well as some of the tools that I share with my clients, as well as these are some of the tools that I use myself, and these are all meta thinking related, and I'll go more into detail on that in just a bit. And before I get into all that fun, awesome stuff, let me go right into the elephant in the room, and that is America's Got Talent. So with America's Got Talent, there's a whole history behind it. I started off my career back in high school, so that was about when I was 15-ish or so. And during that time, that's when I honestly got into magic purely out of boredom. This all started off at a coin laundromat, wandering to a dollar store, and then next thing you know, I just pick up a pack of like a little magic kit, and then just kind of snowballed from there. So with my career in magic and hypnosis during my high school days, that's when I caught wind of America's Got Talent doing live auditions and also online auditions. So I submitted tapes. I've also been to the in-person auditions as well. And that's to no avail. I've done multiple tries and entries. And then at that point, I'm like, all right, you know what? There's got to be another angle. There's got to be another way to be involved. Even though I won't be on the big screen, there's where I come in terms of expertise, and that is consultation for magicians. I've consulted for magicians in various parts of the world, and I've consulted for magicians that have been on the show, not the current big headliners that we all know, because Shin Lim, Matt Franco, those big cats, they were actually scouted out by America's Got Talent, and I had no opportunity to work with them because they got their own teams, and they're already pretty well established, which is how they got reeled on in the first place. But the folks that you have seen on the show that have done some magic effect in some way, shape, or form, I've consulted for a handful of them, and those that do well are the ones that listen, and those that bombed terribly on the show are the ones that didn't listen to me. And another thing to be aware of for America's Got Talent is there was a former Bay Area native. Some of you might know the name Mike Stroud. He was on America's Got Talent, and unfortunately, his appearance wasn't exactly how it should have played out. So in this instance, I'll tell you exactly how America's Got Talent makes those that appear on stage look like total jokes. You know, on the show, you probably know the segment. There's the highlight star characters where you see the whole progression from, oh, you know, I came on the show because I got PTSD or something. And then they gradually become this super awesome megastar that we all know and love. And then there's those on the show that are like butt of the joke type of acts where they're like, oh, I got this amazing talking dog, and then the dog doesn't talk because, they intentionally sabotage the act, even though they are legitimate professionals that have done their act for hundreds of thousands of audiences. And that was unfortunately the case for Mike Stroud because everything that he does is all muscle memory. So he got familiar with the stage that he was working on, and he positions himself at a certain point in his act where he's just at the edge of the stage. What they did on the day of his recording is they shifted it back by several inches. So you can imagine what'll happen next. And that's unfortunately where the magician falling off stage clip comes from, is America's Got Talent rigging the stage in a way to make people goof up. This doesn't just happen to Mike Stroud. This happens to jugglers. Like there was a case of a juggler that had a step, because they go up and down the stairs, a step misplaced, so it looked like they tripped. Another instance would be there's a professional cover artist, and she sings to, I don't remember the exact track, it might have been a Britney Spears track, and she has the track set so that it fits her vocal range. However, what the production team did is they swapped out the tracks and replaced it with the original, which is far off from her original vocal range. And she had to sign and because she signed an NDA, she couldn't disclose how much damage that the show has caused to her for a good number of years. I believe it was about 2 to 3 years. So those are all the nasty, dirty secrets of America's Got Talent that now you're all aware of. It's not all sparkles and sunshine, as we all hope. There's a lot of grunge and basically a lot of work, like literally just rummaging through the trenches just to get to a certain point. So for those of you that are interested in America's Got Talent, it's either you know somebody to get on it, you do the live or video submissions and cross your fingers, or if you're lucky enough, they'll scout you out either to be one of the main headliners or as the joke of the show. So you kind of have to eyeball this whole experience, with a bit of skepticism. But I've been fortunate enough to work with folks on the show, and then those that have been on the show before that are trying to do things live for, their own venues. I've consulted for those folks, and I'm lucky to call some of those folks friends. So with that in mind, I'm going to move on to a quote by Bruce Lee, a martial arts legend, with the fact he talked about the word spelling. Now, the word spelling itself is exactly as it sounds. Essentially, you are putting a spell on yourself. And he is not a big fan of people that do any sort of self-deprecating humor or anything of that nature, because your body cannot tell the difference between sarcasm and it just can't detect any specific emotion. So if you say, oh, I'm a total klutz, and you just say the self-deprecating humor, your body is going to over time take those words into heart, and you'll be more clumsy. Or more relevant kind of explanation would be the doom scrolling that we see on TikTok, social media, with all this negativity, and we just feed ourselves with negative forms of affirmation, causing us to spiral in depression, hopelessness, and other chaos. That's why the term spelling is crucial, because positive affirmation is what our body really needs. And right now we're being surrounded by so much negativity. It's just rewiring our framework into a negative one. And there's not a whole lot of progress. And there's a lot of animosity because of those negative affirmations that we see throughout. So keep in mind spelling, because that's going to be very important throughout. And even though this symbol next that I'm going to show you may seem related to it, this actually stems from my U.S. Army experience. So when I served at a psychological operations unit, the first sergeant there mentioned that the unit does 2 forms of psychology. The first being white or light psychology, and the second being dark or black psychology. Now, I know how racially charged it might seem at this time of climate, but these are the technical terms. With light psychology, the concept is fairly straightforward. You deploy psychological techniques for the benefit of everyone. So it's a win-win situation. That's the aim of white psychology or light psychology. Dark psychology, it's exactly as it sounds, and you probably might have caught wind of it when you put yourself in a little rabbit hole of any internet search, depending on what you're doing during your free time. And that is to use psychological techniques to manipulate people, your surroundings, and you get whatever you want to get, no matter the cost. So this can be through the forms of gaslighting, torture, to just extract some information from an adversary or a specific target. And what I've noticed is, especially now in the business world, because of the fact that we've seen the extremely powerful people, the social elites, some of them deploy white psychology, some of them deploy dark psychology, but I've seen the most successful folk walk that fine line. This is what we call gray psychology. Gray psychology is a is a good understanding of both areas of these different tactics, blend them together in such a way, and either some of those folk can kind of be leaning towards the darker side, which we see a lot of, and then there's the few that do lean a little bit towards the lighter side, and those are the folk that we recognize as philanthropists, very influential, positive people. So some of those things to keep in mind, and then also I do talk about gray psychology more in depth. In one of my YouTube videos, I just touch upon that, and then I can go more into those specifics. So these are some concepts I want you to keep in mind before we get to the simple starter kit, just to get you started. But first, let's talk about the alligator in the room. Now, the reason why it's called magic revealed by an alligator is because alligators and crocodiles, their relatives, are opportunistic creatures. Much like an alligator, we take all these concepts from spelling, deploying both forms of psychology, and in order to position yourself in a way to gather more opportunities and to increase your success rates in whatever you want to do, much like an alligator, you put yourself in a pool. In this case, if you want to get more fish, you go to a place where there's more fish. If you want birds, you go to where more birds are. Livestock. It's all about positioning yourself in such a way where you're essentially making life easy. You don't have to work hard. You just need to know exactly where to put yourself. And that's essentially what I've been doing for a majority of my career, for over 15 years of doing what I do. It's all about positioning myself and placing myself in areas where it makes the most sense and I don't have to have as much of a headache. Now that we've gone over the fun alligator aspect of it, let's move on to what meta thinking is. This is a subject matter that I talk about and I've spoken to people all around the world with. And contrary to the photo, which is just for meme purposes, no, it's not the VR thing. No, it's not Mark Zuckerberg's next big project that I'm disclosing here. My background the background that I have is a psychology, and that stems and connects all the other areas that I've been a part of. So with meta thinking, the definition of what it is, it stems from the word metacognition. For those of you that have dabbled in the psychology, you may have heard of metacognition. I took what Oprah Winfrey does and just simplify things. And instead of calling it metacognition, meta thinking, a little catchier, good for the SEO and online presence. So what meta thinking is the understanding of how you understand things. Some of you may have had those aha moments in life. Others may realize, okay, especially if you're trying to learn something, you play around with different concepts and different strategies to absorb the information better, to retain information, whether it be writing things down, whether it be to do a specific action, because some people are more physical learners, some are more hands-on in that sense, and then others are more visual learners. They just observe by watching. And then, of course, there's just those folk that can just drone off, fall asleep, listen to everything, and still retain that information. It's just interesting how everybody can understand how they understand themselves. I'm just doing everything they can to simplify it here. So let's break down what you can do, this is the starter kit that I want to share with you. And these use tools that we all have. So as we get on with the next slide here, we're going to talk about the first tool that most of us should have. The reason why I say most is because there's a small percentage of folk that have difficulty doing it. It is a type of condition, but I'm going to get on to exactly what this first concept is. So with this first concept, this is fully interactive. I'm going to have everybody take their hands like this. All right. Those that are in theater know what these are, jazz fingers. Perfect. And then what you're going to do is slap them together like this, pressing them together. So much like how football players say, we got to see the white of your knuckles, that's what you're trying to shoot for. From there, after you lock everything from your thumbs to your fingers all the way down to your pinkies, palms together, index fingers up like so. So we have a mock 007 Charlie's Angels type situation. And then from there, you're going to stare at your fingertips. And on the count of three, as you stare at the fingertips, only on the count of three. On the count of three, you're going to stare at your fingertips, and eventually you're going to stare at the gap between your fingers, because on three, you're going to pull your fingertips apart and you're going to stare at that gap. And I want you to imagine that the fingertips are magnets and they just attract and pull towards each other. No matter how hard you try, they're just going to keep going closer and closer, no matter what, no matter how hard you fight it. 1, 2, 3. Pull your fingertips apart, start the gap, and watch as your fingers helplessly magnetize together. And then, of course, when your fingers completely touch, do a little one of these or something just to do a little survey. There you go. And that should be, yeah, that's pretty much a good number of you. And what's funny is there's always those folk that are like trying to actively resist, and it doesn't matter how long their fingers are going to touch anyway. So those of you that had fun, perfect. Most of you should have had fun with this. You can go and put your hands down and continue to watch the presentation. This first concept and tool that we're talking about is visualization. Now, visualization, as I referred to, there's a special case where there's some people that don't actually see pictures in their head. It's a very small percentage of just human beings in general, but visualization is a key tool that allows you to first create that blueprint, which is which in this case is meta thinking. So if you can visualize, you're on your way to developing a meta thinking mindset. With visualization, if you think about some of the most successful people on the planet, if you can't visualize whatever your goals and dreams are, then you're just essentially just sitting there just doing absolutely nothing. And you can see how powerful visualization is. For those of you that have done that little finger example, you can visualize and you can imagine the magnetic forces, because at some point in your life, you probably played with magnets or magnets to a fridge. Visualization is that powerful. Another example of how imagination and visualization is powerful is this example. Oh yeah, see, I said the bad word, and you can all imagine hellfire and everything going on. But I want you to not think of a pink elephant. And the fact that I said that, pink elephant just popped in your head. Remember the term spelling? We just came right back to that. Spelling and visualization go hand in hand. And as long as you're aware of these concepts, then we can move on to the next aspect that I'm going to go over. Next bit looks a little something like this. Now, thankfully, Mark, he did the magic trick with a coin. I believe it was $50. So we're going to take that. See, there's a little imagination right there. Just going to take this. That's just one. I like to work with not just one, but I also like to work with 2, 3. 3 of those. And this is the concept of tangibility. We take what's in our heads and in the ether and gratefully Mark threw a imaginary coin in the air and I was able to pluck it and put it back into reality, which is great. So the idea, and thank you for that. And that's why tangibility is the key thing to start with, the key concept to start with tangibility is the fact that you're taking the first step to bring whatever's in your head into real life. Because you've probably heard of folks that have sat there with idea after idea after idea, but they do absolutely nothing with it. And a fine example of taking an idea and just sitting on it is what we call procrastination. Nothing really comes into fruition. And of course, the more you procrastinate, the more nothing gets done. And eventually, well, that's something that we don't like. And it usually ends up being a fruitless venture. So that's why I emphasize people taking first steps, especially when I work with people. The number one thing that I have dealt with in terms of my clients is the fact that they have all these ideas, they have all these goals and aspirations, but they do absolutely nothing about it. They do the same thing over and over and over. In order to get yourself out of any rut, that's why that quote from Bruce Lee is crucial. You put a spell on yourself saying, I'm going to get myself out of this rut. But you got to be more specific with that. Take some if you visualize and see where you are, where that next step is. If you take that next stepping stone, you go from, I'm going to get myself out of this house. Let's say that's the goal. I'm going to get myself out of this house. And you see yourself in, let's say Mount Shasta, or perhaps Hawaii, the Caribbean. You see yourself there. Then then you have to take an action step. I'm gonna buy a ticket to the Caribbeans. Boom. Just the concept of spelling, visualization, and then eventually making it tangible. You're just, by creating those stepping stones, it eventually snowballs into action. And that's what I like to emphasize with the tangibility aspect of this little toolkit that we have. And as you notice, all these things are things that we have done at some point in our life, whether as children or if our careers call for it, then we deploy these time to time, but we don't really think twice about it. Now, for a third concept, I'm going to do a little magic trick. So I'm going to need Patricia to elect one person to speak up, and they're going to help with this. So,
Carl Walsh.
all right. So go ahead, Carl. Go and turn on your mic, and then we'll take it from there. So, Carl, you ready? Okay, so I'm going to need your mic to be on because I'm going to need you to answer a couple of questions. Now, first, we've never prearranged anything. This is just completely out of the blue. Random selection, correct?
Correct.
Now, Carl, I want you to name any playing card. I want you to think of any playing card in this deck. Let me know when you got that.
Okay.
You have a card in mind.
I do.
Would you be impressed if I named your card?
Absolutely. Of course.
Well, you're just in luck because your card's name is Fred. Thank you. But yeah, what was the card that you were thinking of? Just out of curiosity for everybody here.
The 8 of diamonds.
The 8 of diamonds. So let me see if we can get this. All right. So I'm going to look for the 8 of diamonds here. 8 of diamonds. Yeah, there we go. So we have the 8 of diamonds as you asked for. Now, I do have a confession to make, Carl. I actually use a marked deck. So this is an entirely marked deck of cards. And I'm not kidding about this deck being marked because every single card actually has a name. So we have like a Ken, we have a Zia, basically Steffi, Chris, Bella with both spellings. Basically, every single card has a name on it. And remember how I said I named your card Fred, the 8 of diamonds? It's the only Fred in this pack. And of course, the final concept that we're going to be going over, and this is something that it's a love-hate relationship for most, that is feedback. So what do I mean by feedback? This effect here that I've shown you is a culmination of feedback of different responses, taking different tricks that I've done in the past and then just combining them into one area. There's a lot of, you can see the beauty that feedback has when creating projects, when refining projects, and overall, it's a greater evil that we all have to accept. The biggest thing people fear about feedback is all the criticism and the ego-driven comments. We've got a handful of those. If we ask for feedback, for those that are brave enough to venture out, there's always those, oh, I think. How many, you probably have heard a million of those types of people that say, I think you should do this. So rather than listen to folks that say, I think, because odds are, if they give you feedback in that way, which isn't really feedback, it's more ego-driven, and it's more of them just projecting their jealousy of you being brave enough to take whatever you visualized into reality. They're the folks that aren't able to make things tangible. So just a light example of what feedback is. I'm just going to go over exactly my YouTube career. So my YouTube channel was originally a means for me to showcase my clients, hey, here's some of what I do in different environments, just for people to be familiar with. But one day I decided to just experiment. And my first viral video was me going on the beach, hypnotizing all sorts of people, beautiful women included. And of course, you can see where the snowball and traction goes in. And of course, with fame, the more your videos get views and the more eyeballs that land on it, of course, you're going to get a sea of different comments. Everything from that's crazy to, man, I wish I was him, to, this is totally fake, and then other sorts of various comments. Some of those comments are helpful, and generally I use it as a litmus test to see if the video sparks any form of interaction, because interaction is, if you don't have any interaction on your videos, the algorithm doesn't think that it's a video worth talking about. But over the years, especially when the pandemic hit, that's when my YouTube kind of took a nosedive in that sense. So I have to experiment to reinvent myself. And the fact that the algorithm is constantly changing doesn't quite help. Unfortunately, YouTube isn't my main source of income. My main source of income has always been doing entertainment, speaking engagements, and then also consulting. And that's what's been keeping me afloat. The YouTube was more of an experiment just to see, all right, where can I go with this? And it's a really big lesson for me in terms of the third concept that we're talking about, feedback. YouTube, if you dare say you want to venture off and play with the space or any social media space, social media is a fine example of us using the three concepts that we talked about here. You have a vision of perhaps a sketch, and then you make it tangible by filming, by editing, by putting all that together, and then of course feedback in post-production if you have those resources. But otherwise, most of the feedback that you're going to get is from the live audience. And even though it may seem that with technology and AI coming in and taking all that away, which is scary for a lot of people out there, especially with YouTube and the social media space being highly saturated, AI is starting to do all these things. the AI's feedback is actually the history of all the content that's been created. In terms of visualization, if you have an AI software that even creates images, then that's where the visualization aspect comes in / tangibility. So it's amazing and scary how AI is able to do some of these items, but the one thing that distinguishes the one skill set that distinguishes human beings from AI is the fact that with meta thinking, you have limitless potential, and you're able to create things you're able to create either content. Yeah, you're able to create content and concepts that go well beyond copy and paste. Because AI, in the end, is always going to be copy and paste no matter what. So hopefully with all these things, with all these little tools that I've shared with you, this is just a starting point for everybody here. I want to share these simple basic tools, these concepts for everybody to feel more confident and more excited that the future is bigger and it's always going to be better depending on your frame of mind and what kind of spell that you put on yourself. And also, and I hope that one word that you put a spell on yourself is the word love. Not just because of the fact that it's February, but I'd say approaching the world and coming up with concepts and sharing that wealth through the lens of love is something that the world really needs right now. And if you want me to share some of that love as well, obviously you can see the slide right here. Spread the word. And again, thank you very much for having me, and I'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Fred. It's nice to see behind the scenes. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that is a little upset about America's Got Talent. That is very sad. Could you give us a couple of everyday examples of black and white psychology? Give us an example. So for example, one of your clients, one of your friends, or you.
I mean, the easiest example I can say is black psychology, because a lot of us are selfish. Human beings are inherently selfish creatures.
Yes.
So an example of black psychology, as I mentioned before, this is a common day occurrence that I see, would be gaslighting. You've probably seen people of power or anybody else that you know, they would gaslight someone into a mental frame where they're not able to, let's say, retaliate or argue back. Quid quo pro is an example of dark psychology, because you're essentially blackmailing somebody into doing things that you want. While white psychology would be a simple example would be entertainment itself is a form of white psychology, and it can also be dark psychology depending on the message. So those are just some quick examples, and I don't tell people explicitly what they're doing, but I do keep these concepts in mind when I talk to clients and they have a certain outcome, and then based off of that, I'm like, all right, here are some things that they need to do. So inadvertently, I'm giving folks more white or light psychology based items for them to act upon rather than the dark, because I know that there's time and place for dark psychology, but it's not something that I would always push.
All right, Janelle Barlow, you have the first question. I guess it's the second question because I asked the first. Okay. Yeah.
Need some audio. Fred, yeah. I have a question about memory, and I'm thinking of somebody like the great pianist Yujia Wang, who supposedly has 33 concertos memorized. I mean, she can play that many concertos for memory. And I used to play the piano when I was throughout my life, but when I was a teenager, when I really started and I prepared for a concert, I played 167 pages when I was a senior in high school. And I don't remember having difficulty memorizing. So now I'm going back and I'm learning these pieces over again. And my gosh, I have a hard time. I have such a hard time memorizing at this point in my life. And I'm wondering, is it just age, or did I play more when I was younger? Did I don't know, did the music come into me differently when what's going on here, and what can I do about it?
A lot of folks say age is a factor, which to an extent it is. But when it comes to learning those pieces, do you remember distinctly how and what you did to remember those pieces? Because
Repetition.
I mean, repetition is a way of learning, but you might have a more optimal way of learning something. In this case, if it was repetition, then you would still retain that. But there's something and this is why I planted the seeds with visualization, tangibility, and feedback, because these are all tools that you will still use for the rest of your life. But it's all about introspection. Meta thinking is about introspection, seeing in terms of what you already know and what you've retained. If you can look at your skill sets and knowledge that you have retained for an extended period of time, if you can say, hey, I know how to crunch numbers in a way where it's it's optimal to save people in taxes. How did you end up going about learning that? Some people are more, they say, oh, maybe I jump rope while I was learning these concepts when I was younger, and I retained that because it's a repetitive action movement. That's what allowed me to retain such information. So you have to do a bit of a deep dive to better understand how did you learn the long-term knowledge? How'd you end up keeping the long-term knowledge? And then based off of that, it's going to take a little experimentation as well. Then you'll be able to apply that to, in this case, memorizing, in this case, piano scores. That's more about that self-exploration that I also mentioned in this
And I know it's like my fingers have memory. I can feel that, they do, but the memory isn't as good as it used to be. And I'm just wondering if I'm just going to have to live with that getting older. Just like learning language, foreign languages are harder for older people to learn.
Right, and it's also muscle memory. Repetition and muscle memory go hand in hand. But also remember the concept and the quote that I mentioned earlier about spelling. So definitely having people rethink how they approach life and creating this mindset that utilizes meta thinking. That's what allowed people to really surprise themselves. They've opened a lot of doors in various areas, whether it be personal or professional. So I'd say, so again, I want you to take some of these concepts, and if you've taken notes, and of course we got the recording, go ahead and review them. And yeah, just really, and there's no rush. In terms of learning anything, especially if you're relearning pieces, you just need now we have many years, ever since the very beginning when you first learned it till now, and if there's a bit of a gap in between, you have time to catch up on whatever knowledge that you may not have had. But yeah, I'd say overall just take the time, just look back, and even experiment with how you learn certain pieces.
Okay, thank you. And Colin Hussey, the next question, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Janelle's comment about memorization, because as an actor, I still, at my age, might get handed a script to be memorized. And so what I'll do is, and this is a trick I learned from an acting coach, Charlie Holiday, is record the lines and then listen to the recordings over and over again before I go to bed. But then I also do rote repetitive memorization with it, and then I'm able to get off book fairly with a certain amount of certain degree of alacrity. So that, yeah, I see what you're saying in terms of that kind of, it's also like an audio visualization, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I listen to a lot of my music because now, of course, it's recorded. I listen to it. But there's still sometimes like I can feel certain fingers remember better than other fingers. Maybe this finger doesn't go out far enough to reach the note it wants, but this finger works all right. Maybe I have to do this. I mean, it's very I'm really frustrated. I'm thinking, why, if I had that memorized and in my head and played that music for years, why I can't remember it today.
There's also do keep in mind,
Easily.
yeah, there's another thing to keep in mind with piano also. Piano is also physical as well. So like if I've because Shin Lim, since we're talking about certain magicians, he was a former pianist. So basically, doing hand exercises and warm-ups are crucial. So that way you have the blood flow going. There's that aspect to keep in mind. If you don't like anything physical, if you don't use it, you lose it. So that's another thing to factor in. But because what I talked about here is more about just the mental side of things and the mentality. Having this new approach in terms of thinking, I'd say use that just to springboard better habits. If you want to learn something, you can use this mindset to springboard into, oh, I realized this is meta thinking now, because you're looking at things from a third person perspective rather than just kind of looking through a singular lens. Oh, now I know that I need to warm my hands up. It's been a long time since I've done anything. What have I done in the past few? I mean, if you type on a keyboard a lot, it may help to an extent. But if you don't actively use a keyboard often throughout your life, then you might have to introduce hand exercises, warm-ups, or something related to, in this case, playing the piano. And then that muscle memory is going to come right back in. You got to nourish, because I'd say, especially with meta thinking, the only way you can really accomplish a lot of things, because everything stems from the brain. If you don't nourish your brain, then nothing, then your brain doesn't really want to do anything. And in a way, hand exercises is a form of nourishment for the brain on top of it being a physical awareness and warm up for that.
Now, I broke my finger, Fred. I fell over and I'm still working. So I have to imagine seeing my finger working again, as well as doing my exercises.
Well, it's one if that's what helps you, then yeah, that absolutely can. So everybody's form of visualization varies because everybody has certain, if you see an ideal, what I usually do is I have people just sit down and see an ideal version of themselves and go into extensive detail, everything from head to toe, what that ideal version of yourself is. And then from there, just write a couple, if writing things down helps, just go over some points and items that you need to do to get to those steps. Because everything is a progression. Even because everyone, it's human nature to be like, oh, I imagine this, I want to become this, and boom, it happens like that. It's not always the case, because everybody's bodies and overall physiology and thought processes are vastly different. Some people are like that, which is why there are cases of people with terminal cancer just being all good in a span of a few hours. Everybody works and behaves, and overall the results may vary. It's just you just need to factor in what you currently have and take certain areas and see what works best for you.
All right. And our guest from Colorado, Paul, you have a question.
I do. So you do hypnosis, it sounds like, and I was wondering, how long does it take to hypnotize someone? And then how long does that last? And is there a way to make it permanent, or is it going to be temporary? If you could talk about that.
Yeah, so with hypnosis, I've done a mixture of both entertainment and also therapy here and there. I've done some therapy for some of the one-on-one consulting sessions for some clients, but most of the time I just stick with entertainment because it's less crazy and doohickeys. So entertainment wise, majority of the things that happen are temporary because you don't want somebody clucking like a chicken for the rest of their life. That's just absurd. So the only thing permanent that I do give to people after the show is increased confidence, having a good night's sleep, waking up feeling refreshed and full of energy. Because, who doesn't want that? And I want these folks to remember and be the spokesperson of what I do in that extent. So yes, you can make some things temporary, and yes, you can make things permanent and lifelong lasting. And a fine example of that would be a friend's. So this was a friend's wedding that I was involved in, and I asked the audience, and her husband happened to be one of the volunteers. What do you any special requests do you want them to do? And then she's like, make him do the dishes, and he still does the dishes till this day.
Okay, good. Susan Rowan, your question, please.
Okay. My nephew was on one of the cooking, baking shows, and I watched it. And then I found out from him what really happened. Reality shows are anything but real. They are edited. He said like you said, they make someone look like a jokester or the butt of the joke. The person that they made look the worst, he said, was the nicest person involved. Secondly, when you said spelling, I want to tell you, as a former teacher, I thought, oh, yay, someone's going to talk about spelling. But I think I had a different thought. A lot of magic, it also depends on the magician's ability to speak. And that's where you excel. I know, seeing David Copperfield in Vegas, it was how he, I don't want to say schmoozed the audience, but how he did the verbal. So how much is the verbal preparation part of your connection with the audience? Because just because you can do the tricks doesn't mean you can engage, but you do it.
Yeah, I mean, Copperfield, he schmoozes, hands down. No questions asked. We all know he schmoozes. That's just how essentially, if you look at every one of his performances, past and present, he's always been a schmoozer. So that's nothing new under the sun. But every magician, whether it be, and in terms of delivery and how they present certain effects, if their style is very schmoozy like Copperfield, then they're technically schmoozing. Other folk, if they're just presenting something, they're just presenting something. There's more than one way to approach how you convey certain stories and present certain pieces. Because every time I've seen a certain piece of magic done, and let's say it's a timeless classic done by various different magicians, the way that they present it, not just verbally, but also through body language, because there are folks that just do things straight to music and have no dialogue, which the only dialogue that they have is their physical actions. That's why I'd say magic and theater are some things that I really enjoy. And also I also enjoy just, improv, and also in the comedy scene as well. Just the amount of creativity that I see in these performances, it inspires me to think, all right, what can I do to take things to the next level? What can I do to spice things up for whatever audiences I am? And especially in the corporate and more formal sectors, we're a bit too stiff, and Google, Pixar, companies like those are trying to do their best to shake things up, to loosen the suit and ties a bit, just to invoke some more creativity. But yeah, and definitely when you're talking about presentation and spelling and and especially what I like to do is play around with people's thought processes and perspectives and expectations. That's where I like to have fun. So I'm glad. It's the first to hear that. Not really surprised that you're a teacher thinking about spelling as a certain way, but still.
Well, Susan, as many of our members do put spells on audiences, including our next week's speaker, Mark, who has a question for you. And he was the one who already in the intro gave us some magic. Your question, Mark.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Fred. That was a remarkable demonstration, and I really enjoyed it. And my paltry coin trick can't match yours, but I have a question because the finger experiment, I was pretty well skeptical and convinced that over Zoom it was not possible to hypnotize me, and and yet I found my fingers drawn together. So I know that with your coin, with any coin trick or any card trick, the idea is you've set it up in advance. But what makes it feel magical is our brains trying to make sense of it, make a story out of what you've just done. So with the coins, you're not really making them disappear, but it feels that way, and that makes the experience great. With the fingers, I was just trying it now because I'm so frustrated that that actually happened to me. And I do notice that my fingers want to pull together, and I wonder how much of it is my brain thinking fingers have to pull together, and how much of it is it's hard to keep your fingers apart. They want to go together because of the muscles. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so just the finger thing, it's for me, the finger thing is nothing more than a parlor trick. I just use that as just kind of as a gateway to conceptualize certain items. And in this case, for this presentation, the whole concept of visualization, it's a cool, powerful little parlor trick to do that. Because if you're to just present it in a playground situation or just everyday life, it's pointless, it's meaningless. As Penn of Penn and Teller said, the secrets of magic is really stupid. That's why, and you know this firsthand. But to everybody else, the idea is to take something essentially that's stupid and turn it into something profound, and that's where the art is. If you can take anything, like how in Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo says, "Hey, I want you to sell me this pen." You're taking something really arbitrary and stupid, but you're making it profound. That is your goal as a presenter and as a magician. And as a presenter, it may not be just a tangible item, it'd be a topic. It could be something as arbitrary as like, oh, peanuts. How can I make peanuts interesting? And then that's essentially what's going on there. And in terms of hypnosis over Zoom, since you brought that up, I have hypnotized people over Zoom, but I've done it a few times as an experiment, but I shied away from it because of liability issues. Because if the internet cuts off, yeah, you don't want to know what happens if somebody's knocked out on the other end. They're not able to pop back on a call. So to avoid any legal related issues, as long as I know for sure that their internet is 100% solid and that there's no disruption, that's possible. You can't anticipate when a solar flare happens. So that's why, yes, it is possible to hypnotize someone over the screen. However, I strongly recommend against it because I value people's safety, especially when I do hypnosis, because it is especially dangerous if done incorrectly.
So you didn't hypnotize us. Our fingers just draw together, but you convinced us that you had hypnotized us. Is that what you're telling me?
I never said that you came to that conclusion yourself. I never said that I was hypnotizing anybody. That was just a little parlor trick.
Well, my fingers stayed stuck together for the longest time, and it took a lot of willpower to pull them apart, which surprised me. So I like to think it's all magic. I really do. Well, hello to Janice Litvin and Derek Arden in England. Now, Janice, I saw you type something in the chat. Was that a question or a comment you wanted to direct to Fred? All right. Well, Janice is not responding. Derek, are you? Oh, okay. Claudette.
Fred, I like the idea of visualization. As a coach, I actually teach people to visualize, but one of the biggest parts of visualization is belief. And if you go into visualizing, but you believe you can't do it, for instance, Janelle is struggling with the muscle memory on playing at the piano. If she goes into it and visualizes herself playing, but she starts with, I wonder if I can do it this time. In other words, it's a negative message, then it's not going to work. The visualization must have belief with it from my experience with coaching. Is that true from your point of view, or no?
That's why that's why in these presentations I bring up the Bruce Lee quote, because spelling is a gateway to changing your own beliefs as well. Beliefs,
because
there's certain beliefs such as, there are certain beliefs that are absolutely taboo, like religion and politics, that are going to be more difficult to work with. But overall, for self-improvement and visualization, some of these items in terms of restructuring your brain and thought process, belief is a core factor. And that's why I talk about spelling. And spelling is that
belief.
magical little tool to fix, to kind of tap the little belief section, saying, hey, let's nudge the belief this way so I can actually get stuff done.
All right, so another question from Janelle, short question, then we'll ask Fred for any concluding thought before we thank him. So Janelle?
Thank you. I just wonder if there's something going on in the brain, because there are people who can hear a piece of music and then play it on any instrument. I mean, they just like that, they can play the whole thing. I've never been able to do that. So I think maybe my brain is just not capable of doing that. I don't care how much I self-talk myself.
I mean, there's also, you got to keep in mind, like I said, every person is, they're all born with different cards. They all start off life with a different set of cards. Some people can just play things by ear. I happen to be one of those folk. I have a recorder. My wife got me an automaton, which is a fun little Japanese synthesizer type instrument. And if I can identify how big of a skill I'm working with when it comes to certain pieces or certain songs, then I can just play most songs by ear.
Me too.
I don't actively seek it, but it's something I'm able to do. But do keep in mind, yeah, you can. If you want to accomplish certain goals, there's always a means and always a way to do it. It's just you haven't discovered what works best with your learning style. I don't know exactly if you've identified your learning style specifically for music, but I'm sure you might have had or heard of or had people talk about different learning styles when obtaining and acquiring different types of knowledge, whether it be language or otherwise.
Well, Janelle, the good news is you have made an exceptionally comfortable living doing what you do superbly well, that even if you frustrate yourself just slightly, not having the ability you might have had, I don't know about you, but I look at videos of myself that were taken 20 years ago, and it's depressing. My brother said, your friends who tell you you haven't changed are lying through their teeth, and I know that. So with that, Fred, thank you very much for taking us behind the scenes of your life and America's Got Talent. Do you have any concluding thought before we thank you with a rousing round of applause?
Well, first and foremost, again, thank you all for having me at this meeting. It's an honor, and it's always fun to share not just my magic, but also some of my expertise. And my goal is to not just inspire, but also to entertain and to build a stronger community. And with that in mind, hopefully these concepts that I shared with you help. And the idea behind this presentation is to give you the gateway starter kit to developing a meta-thinking mindset. And with that, let's keep each other in mind, and I'll hopefully see you sometime soon.
Okay, thank you. And I am going to focus on casting a spell on myself to be a wild success at the winter workshop. All right, good. Perfect. Please all tune in, invite your friends to hear Mark next week. Fascinating presentation, I promise you, great books. And remember, if you have not received your invite for the Golden Gate Breakfast Club lunch, please reach out to Hugh Tuck or me patricia@fripp.com, and we will make sure you get the invite. Please, we're up to 60 people. So please respond as soon as possible. The invites are any member, past member, or sort of friend of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club family. So with that, thank you very much. This is Patricia Fripp, your president, tuning out till next week. If you want to come in early,